Is it just you and me, Sam?
Hi everyone, I am mindful we're live right now. We're just waiting for everyone to move on to screen before I open the meeting. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9. Great. So welcome everyone to the council meeting for the 12th of April 2022, which I now declare open. Tonight's meeting is being held online and is of course open to public by live streaming on the website. And I extend a warm welcome to all of you here who are watching. One of the benefits of COVID is the ability for us to be able to move online when required to do so, which was something that we decided to do for tonight, being school holidays and people being out and about. Now, on behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the land on which Moonee Valley is located, that of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us in the meeting or viewing online tonight. I'll now move to item 2 on the agenda, which is apologies and leaves of absence, and we have a full suite in tonight. So we'll move on to item 3, which is the confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and seconder that the minutes from the Neighbourhood Spirit Delegated Committee meetings held on the 17th of February, 24th of February and 3rd of March be confirmed, and that the minutes for the council meeting held on Tuesday the 22nd of March 2022 be confirmed. Moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Bedio. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Now, I wish to declare a general conflict of interest on agenda item 9.8, the solar PV feasibility assessments for council-owned community buildings, due to my employer being one of the tenants of a councillor-owned building. Does any other councillor have any conflict of interest on any item on the agenda tonight that they wish to declare? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll declare a general conflict of interest on agenda item 9.9 for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I will declare a conflict of interest, a general conflict of interest in 9.8 due to a member of my family being a president of one of the clubs notified, documented in this agenda item. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Were there any other conflicts of interest to be declared tonight? No. Item 5 on the agenda is presentations. Were there any presentations tonight, councillors? No. I would like to make note that on Sunday the 3rd of April I attended the 25th anniversary celebrations of the Nepali Association of Victoria. The event was celebrated with various programs, the launch of a very special souvenir booklet, a cultural performance, and awards and certificates of appreciation in recognition of the contribution and achievement of the Nepalese community in Victoria. I was grateful to receive a token of appreciation, which is in the council chambers right now. The event was attended by the Minister for Multicultural Affairs, the Community, Sport and Youth, the Honourable Minister Ros Spence, and several other representatives of the Victorian State Government and Federal Government. The event was very meaningful, and I was very impressed with the multicultural dances and performances. Now, if there were no other presentations, we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is petitions and joint letters. Councillors, do we have any petitions or joint letters tonight? No. Item 7 on the agenda is a public question time, and we have received some questions from the public, from the community this evening. Question 1 comes from Logan Shield and reads as follows. What was the cost to council of offsetting its residual 12,053 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2E through funding 2 projects in India to achieve carbon neutral certification in the 2020 to 21 financial year. And I'll refer to the CEO, Helen, to respond.
Thank you, Logan. Through the Mayor, the cost to Council was $13,511 to offset 12,053 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Question 2 also comes from Logan Shield, and the question reads, what is the likely cost to Council of offsetting its emissions to achieve carbon neutral certification in the 21-22 financial year, given the Victorian Energy Collaboration BECO renewable energy purchase that started on the 1st of July 2021? And I will pass to the CEO for response.
Thank you, Logan. Through the Mayor, based on previous years' inventory and the reduction in emissions associated with renewable electricity from 1st July 2021, Council's reportable emissions for 21-22 year are likely to be approximately 5,500 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. Council has previously purchased carbon offsets that have been banked for offsetting emissions in 21-22 year. These offsets cost $1.60 per tonne. Therefore, the estimated cost to offset 5,500 tonnes of emissions for financial year 21-22 is likely to be $8,800. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Logan, for your questions. Question 3 this evening is from Nina Franceschi. Nina asks, Council is proposing to build a hammerhead turn at the end of Brosnan Crescent, Strathmore on the Moonee Ponds Creek Reserve to accommodate a bin truck to turn. Council claimed the bin truck has lost its turn circle within the Strathmore North Primary School boundary staff car park since the Education Department expanded the school buildings onto that car park. This hammerhead turn idea by Council is a direct consequence of Council not listening to the many residents' complaints when we objected to Brosnan Crescent being sold to the Education Department, and as a result, the parkland again suffers. Why has Council gone back on their promise of advising that the Moonee Ponds Creek will not be affected with the sale of Brosnan Crescent to the Education Department? CEO, could you please respond?
Thank you, Nina. Through the Mayor, Brosnan Crescent is a narrow, dead-end street that provides no ability for larger vehicles, such as emergency vehicles and waste trucks, to turn around at the end. As a result, these vehicles must either reverse along Brosnan Crescent, which poses a significant safety concern to the community, or alternatively, mount the curb and damage the abutting nature strip and open space parkland. Therefore, the problem will not resolve itself without physical changes to the road alignment. To ensure the amenity of this area is not adversely affected, Council intends to enhance this section of Brosnan Crescent through new plantings and landscaping that will further protect and beautify this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for the question, and Helen for the response. The next 2 questions are from Jeff Gordon and relate to agenda item 9.5 to a Montague Street Moonee Ponds. Jeff's first question is as follows. To reduce potentially dangerous conflicts and complex traffic movements, has Council's Transport Department considered to provide vehicle access for both dwellings off Harnett Court? CEO, can you please respond?
Thank you, Jeff. Through the Mayor, it is noted that the site has direct vehicle access via Montague Street. Council's Traffic and Transport Unit has reviewed the proposal and has specified that any new crossover from Montague Street must be located at the eastern property boundary to provide a greater offset to the intersection, along with a requirement to reinstate the existing crossover. It was noted that access from the side of the site would not be impacted by the existing traffic island on Montague Street. The plans reflect these arrangements, and on this basis, Council's Traffic and Transport Unit has raised no objection with the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Jeff's second question reads, for the proposal to adequately meet the policy objectives of Council's adopted neighbourhood character, can the proposal's height be reduced and or front setbacks increased? And again, I will ask the CEO for a response.
Thank you, Jeff. Through the Mayor, the officer's report undertakes a detailed assessment of the application and determined that the proposed development is acceptable, subject to conditions requiring the overall height of the dwelling one to be reduced, as well as increased side setbacks to better align with the neighbourhood character guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you to everyone in the public who submitted, to Logan, Nina and Jeff who submitted questions tonight. Now, item 8 on the agenda is the reports from delegates. Does anybody have anything that they wish to report? No, as not, we'll move to section 9 of the agenda, which is reports. And item 9.1 is 497 to 501 Keilor Road, 2 Ryder Street and 14 Hotham Road, Niddrie. Lots 53, 54, 55, 149, 153 on plan of subdivision 010508. Excuse me. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative, the officer's recommendation with an amendment, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. And what is that?
I'll just bring it up. Sorry, Mayor. So, Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an amended point D to read the first floor balconies and second floor bedroom windows of the type E 14 Hotham Road dwellings to be screened to a height of 1.7 metres above finished floor level in accordance with clause 55.04-6 brackets overlooking of the Moonee Valley planning scheme, and then the rest of the motion to remain the same.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. That's clear for me. Can I just get a general consensus from councillors if everyone understands what that amendment was? Oh, sorry, well, what was moved by Councillor Tyson? Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sypek. Thank you. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. So as you'll recall, this was at our last meeting where we deferred this application. Additional technical points needed to be worked through and consulted with the applicant and objectors. This is a development essentially on Keilor Road, pretty much at the end of Matthews Avenue. It's a part of Moonee Valley that we've and the state government planning department have zoned as a growth area. We all know that along Keilor Road there are sort of medium density dwellings going up along with retail outlets. The reason for my amendment has been working through with the applicant and with an objector that's been particularly affected to work through essentially screening some of the windows to make sure that that objector's amenity isn't affected and that property. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm seconding this under a bit of duress because on one hand, this application does comply, predominantly mostly with the res code, but on the other hand, it doesn't really take into consideration some of the neighbours and some of the things that they will have to live with in the future. Unfortunately, as a council, we have to follow the res code, and that's our predominantly the Bible that we have to abide to. And that's not set by councils, that's set by other levels of government. In the end, Madam Mayor, I agree with my colleague, Councillor Tyson, about the screening up to the 1.7, which is a part of the res code anyway. But I would have liked to have seen the full screening of the windows. But I believe if that was the case, that could be then taken to VCAT and appealed. And I'd rather have the conditions in line with everything that we can to help out the neighbouring residents who might have a bit of overlooking into their backyards. So once again, Madam Mayor, under duress, I am seconding this, but not happy, Jan.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. This development is obviously, the majority of it is on Keeler Road, and I don't have a problem with the proposal as presented fronting Keeler Road, but I do have real concerns about the 2 blocks that have been tacked onto this development that face Ryder and Hotham Road, Ryder Street and Hotham Road. In particular, the Hotham Road address, I went out there and had a look at the site last week, and this is a really, really skinny house block. It's obviously vacant now, but it's really skinny. And obviously, when this came to us 2 weeks ago, it was deferred to have a look at, you know, what we can do to protect the residential amenity of the established houses there that front Ryder Street and will back onto this development across Hotham Road. And I thank, you know, everyone involved for their efforts to make this proposal slightly better. But to be honest with you, I think a proposal like this really lets our residents down, and I can't be more frank than that. We've got established houses in this little pocket that are going to be completely and utterly surrounded by high density development. And I can't support something like that. I think it's wrong. I think it should have been nipped in the bud at the very start. We all know how many meetings and conversations applicants have with our planners and our planning department. We've got balconies facing the residential amenity when they could have, if it had been discussed at the very start, could have been flipped to face a commercial car park that is not developed and may not ever to be developed. You don't know. None of us have a crystal ball. But by putting all these balconies facing a residential area, of which a number of these units are really close to the back fence, I really feel sorry for the people that are going to have to put up with this, and I wouldn't want to be putting up with it. And I can't support it. And yes, the screening will help, but it's also perception. You know, I wouldn't want to be completely surrounded by development like this. So I'm sorry, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just really briefly to say, you know, as the development faces Keeler Road, I think it's a really great transformation of this site into something that I think will be great for the area. I do share some of those concerns, and I think Councillor Sypek's comments, you know, are important, that to the maximum amount that we can through what the planning scheme allows, we need to protect those residents from any potential overlooking. And so I'm very supportive of Councillor Tyson's additional amendment to the officer's recommendation there, just to do all that we can to try and protect those amenity issues. I understand Councillor Sharp's comments, but on balance, I'm supportive of the development. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would anybody else like to speak on this, on item 9.1? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have much more to add. I'll just say that I am pleased to see the additional screening conditioned. I do also empathise with the residents of properties situated on Ryder Street, but I think that the screening will help to make the amenity conditions for those residents better. I take on board Councillor Sharp's comments, but my understanding is that if the balconies were flipped over to the other side, because of the narrow block, it's actually a really difficult, I think, block to sort of navigate with, and what the impact of having the balconies flipped to the other side would mean that the setback of the building would be closer to the backyards of the Ryder Street properties, and I don't think that is, I think that actually would create a worse outcome. So it's a really tricky one because I really do empathise with the residents, but I do think, or I appreciate that the additional screening will help to sort of better those conditions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Tyson, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. And I think Councillor Sharp phrased it well. It's something that we all go through in our thinking and decision making when considering these sort of applications. Ultimately, the initial application that was submitted was compliant with the planning scheme, and you know, if it were to go to VCAT or anywhere else, that I think they would find in favour of that. So I think, as much as it's never ideal a situation, I used to live on Hotham Road myself, so I know the area very well. I think this is the best outcome for both the applicant, the residents, and the surrounds. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Sypek, Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Sharp. That motion is carried. Item 9.2 on the agenda is 367 Keilor Road and 177 Ogilvy Street, Essendon, Lot 152, Block FLP 3151 and Lot 1 TP 112227J. Construction of a multi-storey building in a commercial 1 zone and design and development overlay DDO 7. Construct 2 or more dwellings on a lot in a general residential zone. A reduction in car parking requirements and alteration of access to a road in a transport zone 2. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. My motion would read to defer this application to the next council meeting for a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just quickly, we hadn't received the required information from the planning department to be able to make an informed decision on this. Hence, hence I'm putting forward a deferral motion so we can obtain or have a good look through that information and bring it to the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. Just supporting the deferral. Thanks.
Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Sharp, would you like to close? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Item 9.3 on the agenda is 995 to 1001 Mount Alexander Road and 1 Thorn Street, Essendon, Lot 1 TP 612435N, Lot 1 TP 666520T, and Lots 1 and 2 TP 668431G. Use of the land for dwellings, construction of a 6-storey building comprising retail premises and dwellings in a commercial 1 zone. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an amendment to remove point E relating to car parking spaces and the renumbering of points following that removal of point E as required.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. This proposal was presented to us a couple of years ago. In its original form was 8 stories. And we went through the process of the consultation meeting. It went to BCAT for an independent decision, and it was knocked back at BCAT. And so we now have a revised application in front of us with a 6-story height, with a number of major changes made to the side and rear setbacks to take into account various concerns of residents living nearby. So this application is certainly much more in accordance with the DDO and takes into account concerns of residents in regards to its built form. So I'm happy to support it as it is. The point E that was removed actually related to requesting a reduction in car parking spaces, which I don't think is necessary at all. If a development has extra car parking spaces, I think that is great, and I think that we should be encouraging that rather than not encouraging it. So point E, that's what relates to being removed, is car parking. But on balance, it's an application on a corner site on Mount Alexander Road within the activity centre. So happy to see it supported in its current version tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sharp, for the alternative, and I support your comments. I'm happy to also support keeping the allocated car spaces in the building. As we all know, on-street parking in this area is premium, and anything we can do to accommodate vehicles inside this building instead of forcing them onto surrounding streets is a good thing. So happy to support the application. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't usually speak too much on planning applications, but what I found pleasing to read in this application was under, I think it was 2I, the provision of additional charging points in accordance with clause 18.02-41 car park of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. Obviously, this building is going to have charging stations for EV cars in the future. So that's the way I like to see some of these buildings to come together with charging stations. And as you can appreciate, when the EV cars do start picking up, within Victoria or within Moonee Valley, that the charging stations won't necessarily have to be the responsibility of councils. It'll be the responsibility of the car manufacturers to provide the infrastructure to support these cars. But it's good to see that private enterprise is doing it as well, because we've already got it in Moonee Pond Shopping Centre and High Point Shopping Centre, which was provided by the private enterprise. So I'm happy to support this. I find it's rare that I find planning applications, that comply pretty much with all conditions, and they actually put it in a little bit extra. So happy to support this, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Sharp, would you like to close?
Oh, just quickly, Mayor, I'd like to thank the residents or objectors to this process that have stayed involved over the years, and also a thank you to the applicant who has been amenable and agreeable to their issues that have been brought up. At the end of the day, I think we've got a much better outcome on this site than what was first envisaged. So I thank all involved for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? Is Councillor Sypek, Councillor Isaac, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Tyson, and all those against is Councillor Byrne. That motion is carried. Item 9.4 on the agenda is 320 Ascot Vale Road, Moonee Ponds. The use of the land for a restaurant and related buildings and works, the sale and consumption of liquor and a reduction in the car parking requirement, Section 72 Amendment to Condition 8. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Again, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an amendment to include under the conditions of the permit an amended condition 9. I'll just read that out.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson.
So further to the officer's recommendation to amend condition 8, an additional amend condition 9 to read, the outdoor seating area must only be used between the hours of A, Monday to Wednesday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m, B, Thursday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 9:30 p.m, C, Sunday, 9 a.m. to 9:30 p.m, and D, Good Friday and Anzac Day, 12 noon to 9:30 p.m. And then next paragraph, unless these hours are varied with the written consent of the responsible authority.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. This is an application to essentially amend the opening hours of 320 Ascot Vale Road, which operates as the Ascot Food and Wine. The applicant have been amenable to some of the concerns from neighbours around the extension of the hours to trade into the evening for a dinner service 7 nights a week. By amending some of their opening hours. One of the concerns that was raised through the consultation meeting was just the all-day, everyday nature of this, the amendment that the applicant was seeking. And so to reach some compromise, the applicant suggested that they might open a little bit later than 8 a.m. As their current permit states, in order to then, take that evening trade 7 nights a week. It's a really great restaurant. It's something I think that the area will benefit from. I do note those concerns from the residents about the timing, and the condition 9 was not sought to be amended by the applicants because it would, and by not amending condition 9, it basically shuts the outdoor area before that dinner service extension on those days that they don't currently operate into the evening, Monday to Wednesday. The outdoor areas will still shut at 6 p.m. as they do currently on those days. So the amenity impact in the evening to the neighbouring residences is unchanged through the applicant not seeking that amendment to condition 9. What we realised through the compromise of the changed opening hours was that there were times when namely Sunday morning, that the restaurant or cafe would be open, but the outdoor area couldn't be open for another hour. And then times that the outdoor seating area could be used, but the operation of the cafe wouldn't be open yet. So the suggested change there is just to align those opening hours so that they're consistent across condition 8 and 9, so that all the times that the cafe and restaurant is operating in the morning, the outdoor seating area can be used, and noting just that that outdoor seating area will close a little bit earlier some nights of the week, and trade continuing just inside for that dinner service, just to protect the amenity a little bit of the neighbours there. Otherwise, officer's recommendation for this one.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll echo Councillor Hodgson, and I'll also say that, you know, this is one of our great businesses in Moonee Valley, and I'm happy to support them in this growth opportunity that they've identified, as a lot of businesses have identified through COVID. So more than happy to support this, the extension to hours. Generally in a Section 72, which is this form of application, I wouldn't be supportive of amending conditions that haven't specifically been applied for, but I think in this instance, it sort of makes sense, and I'm sure that the applicant wouldn't have any problems with that. There's no point having hours for the external areas that are usable when you can't actually use the land at that time anyway. So I'm more than happy to support this. I will say that this was a really successful consultation meeting. Obviously, there were some strong views from the applicant and the objector, but I think we worked pretty well within this meeting to strike a compromise. So I thank the applicant for putting that forward. Other than that, not much further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'm happy to concur with the mover and the seconder, and I won't rehash the points that they've raised, particularly the condition 9 point raised by Councillor Bedio. I did want to just hope that this sort of application serves as a bit of a reminder for us at council to continue to try to facilitate and expedite the business applications that come before council. I know our planning team is under a big workload at present and have been for a considerable period of time, but I think this particular application was an example of something taking over 90 days just to get picked up, and thankfully this business has persevered, but we know a lot of our hospitality businesses are out there struggling. So in particular, if there are variations that are required and they're required to be advertised under that particular part of the planning scheme, then it'd be great to try to fast track or at least keep them on track or within the stat time frame, because what we are going to get out of this, as my fellow councillors have mentioned, through an amicable or a workable process and a consultation actually working, is some compromises, but also a really good end result for our city, being a fine dining establishment that will hopefully already is a bit of a draw card for our city. So on that planning note, I know we've been doing some work in the background to try to keep our planning on track and look at ways we can assist businesses, particularly with standard processes like this when they're in activity centres and there are requirements to advertise regardless. So hopefully we can continue to look into that to ensure that we don't lose businesses such as this that mightn't be able to ride out the 10-month process for an amendment to the particular conditions that relate to the business or liquor licence. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close?
No, thank you, Mayor.
I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 9.5 on the agenda is 2A Montague Street, Moonee Ponds, Lot 14 on Plan of Subdivision 011954. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with 2 amendments, please.
Yes, Councillor Isa.
First amendment is an additional point R that says prominent annotations in accordance with condition 15. Second.
Councillor Isa,
Second.
if you need a moment.
Second amendment is an additional point, changed to point 15. That's additional words at the end that says where approval is given, the equipment must not be visible from the street frontages and must not unreasonably obstruct views. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Councillor Isa, apologies, was that on one of the pages in the pack? Councillors, can I just get an indication if everyone's sure of what was moved? Everyone? Councillor Isa, are you happy just to copy and paste what you just read into the chat?
No, I'm operating off a different computer. I can't do that.
Mayor, could I please move that we take a 5-minute adjournment?
I'm happy to. I will just adjourn the meeting. Now it is 7:19 and we'll come back at 7:24. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. We have 8 of the councillors in at the moment, and Councillor Sypek, I believe, just had to step out for a moment. Now, what was moved on the floor by Councillor Isa was for condition 15 to read, except with the prior written consent of the responsible authority, equipment services or other building features, brackets, other than those shown on the endorsed plans, close bracket, must not be erected above the roof level of the buildings. Where approval is given, the equipment must not be visible from the street frontages and must not unreasonably obstruct views. And then 1R to read prominent annotations in accordance with condition 15. Councillor Isa, can I confirm that was correct? What was moved? Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. This is quite a unique site on Montague Street. It's on quite a steep hill. The planners and the applicant have done a fair bit of work together to try and get a good outcome for this site. It does have a 3-storey appearance at the front, so that it's 2 dwellings to be built. The front one that faces Montague Street is a 3-storey building, with the dwelling behind is a 2-storey. The height of the roof is, despite it being the current building is 2 stories, it being a pitched roof and the new building being flat roof, the height of the overall building doesn't exceed the current building's height by too much, but there has been an agreement and a condition through the permit that the planners have put on to reduce that height even further by about half a metre, I think, to make it only half a metre higher than it currently is. Sorry, this is a long-winded way of saying. The extra conditions are to ensure that any equipment associated with the lift or the spa that is going into that first dwelling, if that is to be put on the roof, that it doesn't obstruct the views from other properties any further than the roof height, and it doesn't appear visible from the street. So we're just trying to condition to protect that level of amenity. There are a few other conditions suggested through the officer's recommendation to increase the setbacks, just to improve the building bulk and scale, and especially as viewed from those neighbouring residents. There's been some concern raised about the traffic movement on and off the site through the driveways. And I think that the question through public question time highlighted that one. The transport and traffic engineers in council have indicated that that traffic can move safely. And so for that reason, I'm happy to support this officer's recommendation with those additional amendments, just about making sure that the equipment on the roof don't exceed the current roof height. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. There are a few issues I've got with this one, which Councillor Hodgson has referred to. I understand the officers have conditioned the height to be half a metre lower. However, the existing roof is pitched while the new design is flat, so it does create a substantial visual bulk at the skyline. There are 2 properties opposite that enjoy spectacular views of the city that Moonee Valley have recently included in a heritage overlay. And so to have this imposed and then views taken away seems a bit unfair, and I don't think this design is actually a good outcome for this neighbourhood. There are also obvious traffic safety concerns with having a new crossover in Hartnett Court. which has been mentioned. It's very narrow and awkward and located on a blind corner and Splitter Island. Although the existing dwelling has a crossover, perpetuating the existing problem is a missed opportunity, in my opinion, to improve traffic conditions in this area. I think a better outcome could have been worked through here, so I won't be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Sharp, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Sypek. All those against? That is Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne. That motion is carried. Item 9.6 on the agenda is 6 Bank Street, Ascot Vale, MV/442/2020, construction of 4 dwellings. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move an alternative motion, please, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa.
That Council resolves to advise the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, VCAT, and other parties to the proceeding that it opposes the amended plans in relation to planning permit application number MB/442/2020 at 6 Bank Street, Ascot Vale, on the following grounds. 1, the bulk scale, form and layout of the proposal fails to meet objectives and strategies contained within clause 15.01-5L neighbourhood character and clause 2.3/4 built environment and heritage of the Moonee Valley planning scheme, and furthermore does not meet Moonee Valley 2040 strategy strategic direction 17, a city that fosters local identity. 2, the proposal fails to comply with the following provisions of clause 55 of the Moonee Valley planning scheme. A, clause 55.02/1 neighbourhood character. B, clause 55.02/2 residential policy. C, clause 55.03/1 street setback. D, clause 55.03/5 energy efficiency. E, clause 55.061 design detail. And 3, the proposed development presents an overdevelopment of the site.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
While the applicants made some efforts to improve the design, it still presents as a bulky and inappropriate form within the streetscape of single-storey streetscape, modest double-storey forms. It's the main character of the street. It's a heritage study that's applied to the site. The site is slight to moderate development under local policy, and what presents as effectively a triple-storey form to the streets is excessive and still needs to be reduced. It's a continuous unbroken length of form that's creating an unreasonable form and massing to neighbouring properties. While some of the materials and finishes have been improved, particularly the front, the modern architectural response is still out of character within the street, still creates a bulky facade. And although there are some references to the fine grain of the rest of the street, it's still an inappropriate. Trying to cram 4 dwellings onto this site is a clear overdevelopment of the site.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor, and I concur with Councillor Isa's comments. I think that the original council decision was to, a decision made under delegation was to refuse this application, and I do acknowledge that some not insignificant changes have been made by the applicant, but the main problem for me is that the thing that wasn't changed was the number of dwellings that are to be built on the site, and we're still trying to squeeze 4 dwellings onto this block that just has a single home at the moment, particularly in the street that it's in, with a heritage overlay on at least half of, if not more, of the houses just across the street. So on the south side of Bank Street. and a heritage study, all the rest of Bank Street subject to a heritage study. The character of this street is quite intact, and it's predominantly single story Victorian Edwardian properties. This is a very out of character build, and the fact that it's still trying to get 4 dwellings onto this site means that a 3rd story, although it's been reduced at the back, so dwelling 4 is now 2 stories, they can't avoid needing a 3rd story, and I just don't think it's appropriate to have a 3-story residence in this street. While the plans have do indicate that the bulk is reduced, it's not enough in my view. It still represents an out of character overdevelopment for this site. I think I noted to a councillor that the rendered pictures show it in probably the best light, with having the white roof up against a very overcast sky, which does make it look like it recedes. But I think it's been noted in other times that white roofs aren't necessarily super recessive, so it will still be very bulky from the street. In sending this, so this is in fact a position to take to VCAT, I believe, for a merits hearing. I think that I would like to see council present a view to VCAT that is in keeping with the original decision made under delegation, because to me the amended plans don't adequately address those parts of non-compliance with the planning scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 9.7 on the agenda is community carbon emissions reductions opportunities. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson. You're on mute, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative, please, to read that council resolves to request the Chief Executive Officer to allocate $220,000 excluding GST from the Community Climate Emissions Reduction Reserve to fund the following projects for expenditure in 2021/22 and 2022/23. A, increase active transport, -$15,000 as outlined in the table 2 of this report. B, participate in a collaborative planning scheme amendment, continue to participate in the Environmental Sustainable Design Elevating Targets Group Planning Scheme Amendment through the Council Alliance for Sustainable Built Environment, $20,000 as outlined in table 2 of this report. C, reduce waste to landfill, $70,000 as outlined in table 2 of this report. D, support electric vehicle, (EV) uptake, $15,000 to identify locations for EV public charging infrastructure within Moonee Valley and promotion of the benefits of EVs. E, installation of solar photovoltaic systems on Avondale Heights Sports Club, Buckley Park Tennis Club and Doodagala Tennis Club in consultation with the clubs and subject to the agreement that the ongoing maintenance is to council's required specifications and associated maintenance costs of the system would be the tenant's responsibility, $70,000 as outlined in the report for item 9.8 of the 12th of April 2022 council meeting agenda. And F, I think I'm up to, sorry, A, B. F, investigate options for installing battery infrastructure in association with solar photovoltaic on council community buildings where suitable, $30,000.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Yes, Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, Mayor, as that alternative has been read out, I will have a conflict. Obviously, if that lapses or is not is not adopted, I'll be able to come back in, but I'll have a conflict as it stands, so I will need to vacate.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Okay, so we have the as moved as Councillor Hodgson has said. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, this is a really exciting opportunity that we have with the report that's been commissioned by this reserve we set up at last budget time to start putting into action some initiatives that are going to help our community reduce its emissions. In order to meet our target of net zero emissions in 2040, we have some serious work to do with our community to help tackle some of the big sources of emissions that come from households and businesses in Moonee Valley. There are some areas that perhaps council won't have the biggest impact on, and that maybe federal and state governments have more influence over as the regulators. That's sort of outlined in the report. But that doesn't mean that each and every household and business can't make choices to reduce their own footprint. And we have a role as leaders in our community to make those choices as easy as possible. The report, I think, shows us a pathway to that emission reduction. The two biggest sources of emissions that the report outline are transport, so basically petrol cars on roads, and electricity, so using power from the grid, which is not currently sourced from entirely renewable energy sources. There's also gas emissions from household and business appliances like central heating, cooking and hot water. And our waste is also a big contributor with organic waste going into landfill. The report shows us also the points of influence for council, as obviously we're not in control of a number of those statewide or national factors. But we are here to help our community. And the choices that individuals need to make for themselves can be helped along with our support. We could make it safer and more attractive option to walk or ride your bike to school or the shops or work. We can demystify some of the science and logistics of electric vehicle ownership and take the first step in partnership with the private market to improve access to public charging infrastructure. We can help people to understand the huge impact that they can have simply by throwing away food scraps into the green bin rather than the red bin. And we can make sure that our community council-owned community rooms are powered by the sun and not fossil fuels. Colleagues, this is a small amount of money in the face of a really big problem, but it's a really important start. And I really thank the officers for putting together some options that focus on the short-term gains that we can achieve. But my alternative just takes some of those remaining funds and some that were suggested to put towards gas appliance removal rebates, to put that towards encouraging uptake of electric vehicle ownership and making an immediate impact by installing solar panels on the roofs of three of our council-owned buildings that are on leases. Further to that, by investigating battery installation at some of those sites, we could potentially reduce further the energy that's taken from the grid, which, as I mentioned, is not fully sourced by renewable sources. It's a small start, but it's a start. And I think the report provides us a pathway forward to keep going with this work. And I look forward to that. There's a lot to do and a lot of it requires individual choice and action, but we want to be, as a council, here to help. And I hope councillors will agree that this is a good start.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hodgson, for that. I know you've put in a lot of work to this motion, and I think when we were discussing as a councillor group a year ago about sort of setting up these funds for various things, some have been more successful than others, but as you said, I think it's a good start. I'm pleased to see as well us installing more photovoltaic on our properties, and I think that's a really good thing that we can really keep going for the rest of time, really, in terms of continuing that process. But I think this is a really good step. I think as well, I know you sort of touched on it, but things that we can do out in the community and as a council, but also that education piece around waste, around EVs is always ongoing. I know in my household, it's a constant education piece of what is recyclable and what can go in the green bin and everything else. So I think it's all ongoing, and there are things that we can do collectively, but also taking individual responsibility and enabling that. And I noted as well that I beat Councillor Adams to the pip on seconding the motion. So I'll stop there and allow her to add.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Tyson. And thank you, Councillor Hodgson, for putting forward this alternative. Happy to support the suggested distribution of funds to the said projects in the proposed motion. $220,000 really is a very modest spend in the scheme of things. There is so much work that needs to be done in this space. I'm particularly pleased to see $70,000 allocated to community engagement and education around reducing waste to landfill. We've done the hard work in making this an available service. We just need residents to start using it. The more organic waste we can divert from landfill, the better, and we urgently need to start behaviour changes now. Also happy to support the installation of solar PVs on Avondale Heights Sports Club, Buckley Park Tennis Club and Doodagala Tennis Club, which are clubs identified in report item 9.8 that were identified as immediately feasible for solar PV, as they have no structural and/or electrical barriers prior to installation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like Councillor Nation?
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry to cut you off. Look, I commend the motion and the projects put forward. I guess my only hesitation is that from my understanding, and maybe my understanding from when we spoke about this last year is a little bit different to others, but I thought the main focus of the fund was to really look at, I guess, community emissions and actions that are going to help the broader Moonee Valley community reduce their emissions. It is a very finite amount, $220,000, and that's obviously very little. And when we spend it over a number of projects, it gets less and less. So my hesitation here is particularly that point 6, investigate options for installing battery infrastructure in association with solar photovoltaic on council community buildings where suitable. Are we using $30,000 of this very finite amount in the fund to do something that we may have been able to do as business as usual as council, and that would therefore free up that money to do something that's a little bit more community orientated, potentially like with the $15,000 to support EV vehicle uptake. Again, is that some work maybe we could do internally, and therefore we could reallocate those funds to something with a much greater community outcome. And one of the things that really stood out to me in the report was the Getting Off Gas program, and particularly because that was aimed at low-income households. It was that rebate under the state government stream, and I know that that is a little bit of duplication, but I think we need to give those opportunities to a whole range of people in our community to try to reduce their emissions. The report in the BAU modelling had emissions from natural gas in Moonee Valley increasing from 15% in 2020 to 32% in 2040 as a percentage of the total emissions. And therefore, I did like that as a way of enabling people who might not necessarily have an EV, spend money on an EV car, or have the capacity for solar panels or what have you. Just another avenue to try to make sure that we're not forgetting about people that want to do something, but it's obviously a challenge. So that's my only worry here, is that we're tying up money with stuff we could do as business as usual, and is that taking away from some other great projects in that report?
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I tend to concur with Councillor Nation about, we're sort of stating the obvious here where we could be doing things internally. But there are some very good points in here as well too. My only concern is the landfill to waste. I hope we can maintain the education side of things rather than the policing of this. I've noticed on the news lately that some councils are going towards having inspectors looking at people's rubbish bins. I tend to believe our community is quite well versed in recycling, and I wouldn't want to see this money spent on investigating people's rubbish bins and walking through there and opening them up. I hope we don't go down that way. I hope we go down the way of just educating, maybe doing it multilingual, because we are a very multilingual community here. And also, I agree with Council Nation. I have concerns about getting rid of gas cooking hot tops and stoves, because there are cultures which actually do most of their cooking on gas and not electricity. And I think they might find it hard to change over to electricity. So I think we're going to have to be sort of sensitive here, where we should encourage to go towards electricity, but not to, do a mandate across the whole city or anything like that. I would feel very, very uncomfortable mandating that we can't have any more gas hot tops or stoves here. But look, as the way it stands, I'm happy to support it, but I just want to err on the side of caution on the things that I spoke about.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other Councillor Bedio?
Thank you, ma'am. Concur. I have to say, I think there are some really great ideas in this motion, but I do concur with Council Nation, and I'm concerned about some elements of the spending. In particular, obviously, I'm a big advocate in increasing active transport. I'm just weary as to whether $15,000 to develop a dedicated education, marketing, promotion, and communication strategy is actually going to make much of a difference in the way of reducing emissions. I don't think the barriers to active transport and bicycle ownership is that people don't know much about bicycles. I think there's a genuine concern for safety. People don't feel safe because we don't have the correct infrastructure. I would be more inclined to put that money aside to help better develop the infrastructure. Obviously, I know $15,000 isn't going to get us very far, but I'm just questioning whether that investment in the education is actually going to make much of a difference, or whether it's going to be a waste of money, and whether that's something we should be doing anyway within our current communication team. Like, we already do post about lots of things on social media. What's going to be different about this one that's going to cost $15,000, and why does it, why are we having to allocate this in a motion like this? I'm a little bit confused about that. I guess also the getting off gas, while I think that's a good idea, I also think 20 households is really minimal difference and is going to have a minimal impact on emissions for quite a substantial amount of money. Again, that $40,000, wouldn't it be better to put that $40,000 alongside the $15,000 straight into active transport initiatives and infrastructure? Still, it's not much money, but that goes some way into helping deliver those projects, which I think are the real barrier to people accessing active transport. So I think the $20,000 for the planning scheme amendment, I think, is a good idea, and that's something that we should get behind. I know other councils have done that successfully. But yeah, and the FOGO is also something that I think we should get behind. But I'm just concerned that we're wasting money on the educational pieces and spending a lot of money to get 20 houses off gas, which I really question how much of an impact that's going to have on our emissions in general. So I'm a little bit concerned about this motion. So I'm keen to hear from any other colleagues if they have any feedback. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Mayor, can I ask a point of clarification, possible?
Yes, Councillor Nation.
I just want to ensure that I'm reading the right motion that has been presented to us. So I was arguing the inclusion of the low-income households on the basis that the motion that's been presented doesn't have that inclusion. Can I ask through the chair to the mover of the motion, am I correct in that your motion does not have the low-income households gas rebate that I was arguing for?
Councillor Hodgson?
That's correct, Councillor Nation.
Okay, thank you. While I'm at it, could I ask a point of clarification through you, the Mayor, of to the CEO or relevant director? I just would like a point of clarification, if it can be answered, potentially not. Point 6 in the current motion, which is investigate options for installing battery infrastructure in association with solar photovoltaic on council community buildings where suitable. Through the chair, has that could that work be done within the operations budget, or is that something that needs to be specified through a motion?
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I'm happy to take that that point of clarification. I don't know whether we'll get a response. CEO, do you have a response for that one?
Through the Mayor, I don't have the information with me. Thank you.
That's fair. And Chair, my other point of clarification, am I allowed to have 3 in a row? Is that permitted? Was through you, similar with point 4, the support electric vehicle uptake, 15,000 to identify locations for EV public charging infrastructure. Through you, the chair, to the CEO, relevant officer, have we done that work as part of the previous item that came before council about a month ago, or does more extensive work need to be done? Again, it probably can't be answered, but
yeah, I am mindful that obviously there was an alternative that was put. CEO, did you have a response for that one? Which the CEO may just be trying to find a response, see if there is.
Through you, the chair, I'm happy to withdraw. If it wasn't part of the regional officers' rec, then I don't want to make the officers come up with things on the spot. So happy to withdraw that point of clarification. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Okay, so we had those 2. So we've had the points of clarification. We've had most people speak. Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, just in response to comments made, I mean, I like the motion as it is, but equally I'm keen to have a motion that everyone feels they're able to support, because I think it's so important to us. Could I seek, please, to move an amendment to remove what's been called point 6, but I think it was moved as point F. And
sorry, just to confirm, that's the investigate options for installing battery infrastructure, that point?
Yeah, and put that as with point 1, so to change point 1 or point A as it was moved to increase active transport, 15,000 as outlined in table 2 of this report, and 30,000 for appropriate projects to support cycling infrastructure, or cycling and walking infrastructure, active transport infrastructure.
So just to confirm, we're removing point 6 and then changing the first point, the increased active transport, $15,000 as outlined in table 2 of this report. What did you want that to read?
And $30,000 for appropriate active transport projects, just to keep it.
Thank you. Okay, at the end of the first point, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's clear enough. Councillors, is there a seconder for that amendment? Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Adams, Councillor Adams. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Look, just speaking to the amendment only, there are so many projects we could fund through this very modest amount of funding, and the report's given us a range of abatement opportunities and given us some indication of which ones can accelerate the decarbonisation and make reductions in emissions. And if there's a greater collective interest in putting more of the money towards increasing active transport, I think that's a solid proposition, because active transport is one of the biggest ways the council can make inroads in emissions.
Thank you. Councillor,
Just in response to the question in chat there, it's the 50, it's, yes, it is what was in, it was,
yeah,
that's correct. It's the 15,000 plus 30,000, sorry, yeah.
Thank you. For those at home who can't see the chat, just to confirm that it is the $15,000 stays, and then it's the $30,000 is added. So increase active transport, $15,000 is outlined in table 2 of this report, and $30,000 for appropriate projects to support active transport infrastructure is how the motion, how the amendment was moved. And then Councillor Adams seconded it. So Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, look, happy to support that amendment. Happy to support anything that's going to make some meaningful impact to emission reduction, and I think this will go a long way, probably more so than battery infrastructure, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would anybody else like to speak to the amendment? No. Sorry, Councillor Sypek on the amendment.
Madam Mayor, this was one of the actual things that I liked. I liked the batteries. I think the batteries would be the most instantaneous part of all this. With our next item with solar panels, we're going to be putting solar panels on a lot of our buildings, hopefully, and these batteries would be an absolute asset. It'd be an instantaneous asset. We wouldn't have to wait to build infrastructure. We've already got the infrastructure there, and these batteries would be a permanent fixture, which would be working straight away. So, Madam Mayor, I'm a little bit disappointed that this is now being thrown at us at the last minute.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would anybody else like to speak to the amendment? Councillor Isa, would you like to close on the amendment?
Look, I guess it's, I was responding to some comments made, trying to find ways of pleasing everyone, I guess, is quite tricky, obviously. And there are, as I said, there are a whole range of projects that are worthy. I do note that the officers have given us some advice that, you know, it is quite complex, the whole battery infrastructure, but the advice is that a battery doesn't reduce emissions but provides energy security, because once you've got the panels producing the solar, it goes to the grid, and it whether it's being used on site or whether it's assisting others, it's still reducing emissions and community emissions in that way. So the battery infrastructure itself isn't reducing the emissions, which is the central purpose of the fund that we've put aside this money for. So I guess that's also what I was responding to the comments that were made on the floor, and also the advice that was provided to us. I mean, I don't think it makes a huge difference. I don't think it's worth us arguing hugely about. I think what we're doing here is trying to put money towards projects where we can, and I think the points made about the cycling infrastructure were good ones, and I was just picking up on that.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. So I will put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Nation, Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is Councillor Sypek. The amendment is carried. We're going back to the substantive, and Councillor Isa, you're yet to speak on the substantive if you wish to.
Mayor, there's so much I could say about this. I'd bore everyone to tears. So I'm glad we're doing this. It's taken a while. With the report that we commissioned, I think it's really useful, and I think gives us some good directions in the coming years, and I hope we can continue to take up the opportunities and advice that it provides.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Now, as everybody has spoken...
Can I move an alternative, an amendment, sorry,
Yes.
Councillor
Councillor Nation?
And hopefully it gets seconded so I can discuss it. I would like to move an amendment that point C, the number is changed from 70,000 to 50,000.
Yes.
And then a new point F, it will be because we've deleted point F, so a new point F, which would be allocate $20,000 for a getting off gas trial for low income households.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I think that is clear. I will ask for a seconder for that motion, for that amendment. Now, Councillor Tyson, you seconded the substantive, so you can't second the amendment. So just as a reminder, Councillor Hodgson moved and Councillor Tyson seconded. We are now up for an amendment in which Councillor Nation has moved and Councillor Sipek, yes, you can second. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Sipek, because I hopefully will get some support if I get the chance to discuss the motion or the amendment. So again, building off the discussions that have been had, particularly the point raised regarding point C, which is the reduced waste to landfill, $70,000, but it's actually more a communication piece. And I think it was noted by a councillor that we do currently do a lot of the comms work and comms work well in this space, and there's been things in social media today. And looking at that table where it does specifically say that it's a communication, community engagement and education fair for food organic collection and curbside waste reforms, so $70,000. My amendment seeks to reduce that down by 20,000, noting that we do a lot of our comms in-house, and hopefully there'll either be operational budget or more so just hours for our comms team that are already doing that great work. And the purpose of reducing that as well is to add that $20,000 in for 10 low-income households to be part of the Getting Off Gas trial. And I note the comments of Councillor Sipek and Councillor Bedio, who didn't think it was a good idea, but let me try to twist your arm a little and say, look, this is only $20,000. It's only 10 households, and I think the motion that's before us covers a whole range of members of our community, particularly the sporting clubs, active transport, etc. Let's at least show we have some intent there to include something in there for low-income households, particularly because it was in that original officer's recommendation, so it is an officer-recommended project. I know it's only 10, which is a very small amount, but I just think we need to always think about measures or enabling all members of our community to be part of a community, a council-led, but a community effort in reducing emissions. I did speak to the point that gas emissions by 2040 for Moonee Valley will end up being 32% of total emissions. So it's not insignificant. What we're putting in might be insignificant, but I hopefully, in that rambling for 2 minutes, have managed to twist a couple of arms to support this amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Sypek? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to this amendment? Councillor Tyson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I haven't decided how I'll vote on this, but it is good to see that Councillor Sypek's concerns about a sort of post-apocalyptic gas mandate are gone. So I'm pleased to see that, but I'm here to keen to hear what other councillors think with this before I vote.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Isa?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nation. I appreciate the Getting Off Gas campaign, and I do think it's a really valuable one. The reason I guess I was less enamoured about supporting this one now in this particular moment in this way was partly because the report doesn't or suggests that it's not something that we should necessarily be doing at this time. It says that there are other programs, state government programs, that are already accessible, and Moonee Valley does not need an additional subsidy to replace gas appliances. But also that the emissions, the raw emissions from gas are just so much smaller compared to electricity and transport. And the report relies on a sort of a business as usual model of reductions of electricity and transport, assuming a certain uptake of 40% PV by 2030 and an uptake of electric vehicles to a very high percentage. I think it's over 50, by 2040, 80% electric vehicle. So it assumes that that's going to happen anyway. But I just don't think we're at the point of being able to assume that. And I think that we know that transport and electricity are where the biggest cuts can be made, not in gas at this time, and that we need to really light those fires behind reducing electricity, using renewables and using sustainable transport. And that's why I'm opting for an emphasis on those. I take the point about the trial and offering for people, low-income people. I think that's an excellent idea. It's just not, it's something I probably would have preferred to have tried next year rather than immediately now, where FOGO, we know we're sort of really ready to go there, and we need to really support our community in that mission. So I'm not really sure how I'll vote on this, but I just wanted to explain my reasons for, because I think it's a very valuable proposal. I just wanted to explain my reasons for perhaps being hesitant.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would anybody else like to speak to this amendment? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you. I guess I'm still a little undecided. My understanding is natural gas, when it burns, it releases half the amount of CO2 that coal, that electricity does if it's generated by coal. So my only concern is if we're moving people away to electric appliances and they're not on a renewable energy supplier, or they don't have PV cells, that we might actually be causing more emissions in doing that. I completely support the notion of making sure that we have initiatives for low-income housing, low-income households. But I mean, ideally, I'd be looking to see if we could provide grants or subsidies for PV cells or batteries or the like for those households over gas. But I understand that obviously at some point we're going to have to move off gas, and then hopefully we are in a fully sustainable electric market, and so that's not going to make much of a difference. But my only concern is in the interim, potentially in lower income households, they're not willing, or they don't have the capacity to invest in PV cells or pay more for electricity for fully green suppliers. So I'm just not sure whether we're actually going to fulfill the intent of the fund by reducing emissions if we do this. But I mean, I'd be keen to maybe do the trial and get an evaluation on whether it's actually a meaningful difference. But yeah, I have some concerns about it.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would anybody else like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks, Councillor Bedio. I think this, I totally support the getting off gas trial as well. I think it's just so unfortunate we've got such a small amount of money to spread across a lot of initiatives that can make some meaningful impact. I really don't want to take that money away from the reducing waste to landfill education. I know that I can appreciate that through comms we do a great job on our social media, but as Councillor Sypek mentioned earlier, we've got a very diverse community, and I think some printed materials going to all households is a very costly exercise. And, you know, having also those instructions or education in different languages will go a long way to educate our diverse community. So I do want to support the getting off gas trial, but not at the expense of the money for reducing waste to landfill education. So I don't think I can support this this amendment, but I support it in principle. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Nation, would you like to close on your amendment?
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor, and thanks everyone for the comments and feedback. I guess back to one of the original points I made about this being a community, an effort to reduce community emissions, and it hopefully being the kickstart to many projects and a lot more funding. Again, my argument for including the getting off gas and just $20,000 is it was recommended by the officers along with other gas reduction measures. I note the report may not necessarily, or may not state that, but officers obviously deemed from the report that it was worthy and it would have an impact on community emissions to include it. And the other point being that if this is the start of many projects, then we're spending a third of the fund, $85,000, on looking for EV locations and solar panels on just 2 sporting clubs. That's $85,000, and that's not necessarily going to filter down to all people in the community, particularly those in low-income households who might not be part of those clubs and might not have the capacity to own an EV for a considerable period of time. So what I'm asking through the inclusion of this point is that we consider the low-income households and we just do 10 $2,000 trials, less than what the officer's recommendation was, and see if it's something worth pursuing. If it's not, there's $20,000. If it is, then it's the start of something, and I'm hoping that even in next year's budget, if we need up the FOGO comms budget, we can. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. I will put this amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Nation, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Bedio. All those against is Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. That amendment is lost. I am mindful that everyone has spoken on the substantive, but I will leave a moment in case there was any other amendments that people wanted to move. No, in that case, Councillor Hodgson, back on you are the mover of the substantive. Would you now like to close on the substantive?
Thanks, Mayor. And look, thank you all councillors for your passion and interest in this. And, you know, I stayed quiet through those amendments. I truly believe that no money spent under this reserve will be badly spent. I do hope that there will be opportunities, Councillor Nation, to tackle the gas emissions in the near future. Council obviously is carbon neutral in our efforts, and we know that council emissions only amount to about 1% of the total emissions from Moonee Valley. So the really major thing to tackle is our community emissions. And as I've said, any efforts that we make is going to help with that. It just helps. I mean, if you were someone wanting to put solar panels on the roof, to be able to follow suit and see a leadership, and even, you know, I know there are a lot of referrals and recommendations that are made just word of mouth in some of our community networks that just help people to understand what opportunities they have in the choices they make to be able to reduce their own emissions. I just wanted to touch on one point really quickly, that bin inspections are a really important way that we evaluate the effectiveness of the education programs that we run about how to use the bins, and as far as I'm aware, are not used for enforcement. So please don't worry that people are coming around and you're going to get in trouble for how you use your bin. The other points I had down were made moot by the amendment that was carried, so I won't go into that. But just to say, look, I think that no spending in this area is bad spending, and I hope we spend a lot more in future.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Now, councillors, I have declared a conflict of interest in the following item, and I note Councillor Sharp also has a conflict of interest in the following item who has already been removed. So I will pop into the waiting room while the Deputy Mayor chairs item 9.8. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We have item 9.8, solar PV feasibility assessments for council-owned community buildings. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa?
Thanks. My screen's just gone into a different mode. I'm just sorry. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point C that reads, install solar photovoltaic systems on Avondale Heights Sports Club, Buckley Park Tennis Club and Doodagala Tennis Club, subject to, sorry, the words that were then moved were slightly different. I'm just trying to, subject to consultation with the clubs. Sorry, the words that were moved in the end was in consultation with clubs. And sorry, I'm just going to read the sentence again, if I may. Sorry, I'm going to start again. Install solar photovoltaic systems on Avondale Heights Sports Club, Buckley Park Tennis Club and Doodagala Tennis Club in consultation with clubs and subject to the agreement that the ongoing maintenance is to council's required specifications, and associated maintenance costs of the systems would be the tenant's responsibility, hyphen as outlined in the resolution of item 9.8 of the 12th of April 2022 council meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
While I'm speaking, I would just appreciate as well if perhaps the CEO officer can just check that the wording that I've used there in the motion is suitable. I've just followed the motion from the previous item to incorporate it. but I
Governor,
just want to.
can we just ensure that the motion is in alignment with the previous agenda item 9.7 that was passed?
And that the CEO is comfortable with the way that that's phrased, if there's any need for.
Would you like to raise that through a point of clarification, Councillor Isa, through to the CEO?
Perhaps that's a good idea, CEO. Perhaps if you wouldn't mind just clarifying that you're comfortable with the wording that's used there.
Through to you, CEO.
My understanding the wording is repetitive a council resolution just passed. Is that correct? So I don't have any issue in that case. Thank you.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
So this motion stems right back to December 2020 when we asked council officers to look at what council-owned community buildings might be suitable for solar panels. One of MV 2040's actions is to install solar systems on council and community buildings. It's action 13.1, and we were keen to progress that. It's taken some time because we've been doing due diligence and making sort of whittling down the list progressively to make sure that we are putting solar panels on the best possible locations or those that are ready. We do have a really useful, a terrific 200-page report now that looks at 13 different buildings that are leased and so aren't on our 100% renewable energy. And this very excellent report tells us what needs to be done to those roofs to make them solar panel ready. These 3 buildings are ready at the moment. Maribyrnong Park Tennis Club is not far off either, just needing a little bit of work. So, and then the Nidri Community Hub is also ready, just a little bit more expensive. So I'm really optimistic that we over time can both support tenants to potentially seek state government grants or federal government grants, whatever might be available to put panels on roofs. But I'm very pleased that we might be able to do these 3 immediately to really support our community to reduce emissions. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think Moonee Valley's got a great history about putting solar panels on buildings. And I think a few years back when Josh Frydenberg was the Minister for Environment, we got a grant from him for $300,000 to put solar panels on a lot of our buildings. And one of them is the clock tower. The clock tower's pretty got a lot of solar panels on it. And a lot of our other buildings have got it, especially also with the East Kill Leisure Centre, which is our newest building, which is completely filled up the roof with solar panels. So now we're getting down to the smaller and some of the more optimistic buildings that we have in our community. And I'm fully supporting of this motion because I think solar panels is a great way to go. It's a great way of utilising the sun. And well, I hope from the previous one, I hope we can probably get some batteries in some of these places because I think they would be a great asset. But that's for a future time to argue over. But I'm happy to support this, and I hope my colleagues support this as well.
Thanks, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Bedio. That motion is carried unanimously. Now I invite the Mayor to return to continue to chair the meeting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for that. I'll just confirm we've got Councillor Sharp back. Yep, got Councillor Sharp is back. Yep. Now, Councillor Bedio, we are up to item 9.9, and I believe that you have declared a conflict. So if we can have Councillor Bedio is in the wait room. So item 9.9 on the agenda is the grant program for properties in heritage overlay areas. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. This is a response to an earlier resolution of ours when we moved a very large heritage overlay planning scheme amendment and sought that officers look into ways that we can support those people property owners who were now going to, well, when the amendment was passed by the planning minister, would be subject to the heritage overlay and the sometimes additional costs associated with that. It's come back to us with a recommendation that there's a grant program run through Heritage Victoria, which could offer small amounts of money to improve, make updates or renovations to just the facade of buildings in a heritage overlay. Small amounts of money, matched funding from the property owners, just to make sure that those facades with intact heritage are kept up. Now, heritage in Moonee Valley means a lot to all of us, and it's something that we all need to protect. It belongs to us all and it benefits us all, and it doesn't impact us all equally, which is why we asked for this investigation. Not all heritage in Moonee Valley remains intact. Some buildings don't have heritage value, but many do. And I think that we've recently recognised that through this heritage planning scheme amendment, and that we continue to do large studies at great expense to work towards protecting heritage that does remain intact. For property owners who own heritage buildings, they carry the responsibility of protecting that heritage on behalf of all of us. Some do this with pride and some do it begrudgingly, and a lot of the objections to when we move additional heritage overlays are some of the cost burden that is created through that. As a council, I think we make the decision in seeking a heritage overlay that the heritage of those properties is worth protecting for the community benefit. And on the face of it, the benefit to the community is in aesthetic value. When heritage properties are left to fall into disrepair, it impacts on their heritage, the benefit that the community experiences from that heritage value. A great example of that is some of our heritage commercial properties. Landlords who don't gain any additional value by uplifting the aesthetic value or the facade of the building, they'll collect the same rent at the end of the year anyway. They don't have an incentive to keep our business precincts, our heritage business precincts looking beautiful, but the business owners and tenants do. If this, sometimes that's out of their hands. The businesses that run out of these properties can't convince their landlords to do those works if they're not works that the tenants are able to undertake themselves. I think it would be really great to have a fund available to encourage landlords to make a small investment, a paint job, that would make a huge difference to the beautification of shopping districts and bringing people to the area. There are quite a number of shopping precincts in Moonee Valley that have heritage overlay, just a few are Racecourse Road, Pin Oak, Union Road, Puckle Homes, Mount Alexander Road, all up and down, so all the way from Flemington up into Essendon, Napier and Rose Streets, Keilor Road, and a number of properties throughout. A grant program of this nature is about continuing to invest in our heritage and protect that heritage. It's done on behalf of all members of the community, not to line the pockets of those who own properties in heritage overlays. The fund would be used to enable property owners to keep up appearances, not increase the value of their property. And the guidelines of the fund would be able to make sure this is the case. I really hope that my councillor colleagues will be able to see the value in protecting the heritage of Moonee Valley for all people in Moonee Valley.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Tyson? No? Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I've previously expressed my concerns with this program, or this proposed program, in the existing climate, when you know, we're trying to make every dollar count, and maybe now's not the best time to allocate money to individual householders to help improve the renovations of the facade. Not discrediting any importance that we have of our heritage properties, but we did 2 items ago decide not to do a $20,000 trial for low-income households to try to reduce their emissions. So I just, for me personally, to then 2 items later, look at a potential grant stream that will help individual property owners underwrite part of their renovations, I probably just can't support. I do see merit in the commercial properties, particularly because we as a council do spend considerable amounts of money on our commercial streetscapes in our activity centres, and look, I might be partial to, if this program was just initially in the 3-year trial for commercial properties, but in terms of it being for private properties, and we've got 6,000 properties within heritage areas. I did speak previously about a significant proportion of those being in areas where there is quite high median property prices, and I know that people might have money owing on said properties, etc. Yeah, I'm just not overly comfortable with that idea right now, as we have an extremely stretched council budget, and you know, we're nitpicking over tens of thousands of dollars and where it's going to go to address community carbon emissions. So as it stands with the motion before us, I can't support it. As I said, if it was more to do with commercial streetscapes, and yeah, I might entertain it. In terms of like a means test, how that would work, I'm not sure. But yeah, I'll see if there's any amendments or what others have to say. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sypek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think this is a wonderful idea if you live in the Moonee ward or the Buckley ward, but if you're in the Rosehill ward, well, you're not going to get a slice of any of this pie whatsoever, because the only things that are heritage in Rosehill are 2 things: the plastic shark on top of the fish and chip shop on Hoffman's Road, and Fox Lane Motors, which is now Fox Lane Gym. So not one resident in the Rosehill ward will get any chance whatsoever of applying for this. So unless this is a municipal-wide grant that everyone can apply for in some sort of way, I'm not willing to support this. And secondly, the ratepayers of Rosehill ward, it will just not wash with them. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd just like to move an amendment. please. I'd like to move a point B that says request officers to investigate the feasibility of introducing a means tested element into the eligibility criteria and report back by November 2022. And then in what then is the point D, for it to read, authorise officers to progress a funding agreement contract with the Victorian Heritage Restoration Fund based on the proposed program details in attachment 1, subject to a small 1, endorsement of Council's 2022-23 budget and inclusion of a heritage reserve, and 2, a final resolution on eligibility criteria pending B above.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. That amendment is moved. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Tyson, you seconded the substantive, so you can't. There a seconder, Councillor Adams, seconding the amendment. Thank you. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thanks, Mayor. The reason that I'm, I guess, overall supportive of the idea of trying to support people do genuine restoration work, and it's not renovations, it's genuine restoration work in heritage overlay areas, is because we're putting a lot of properties into heritage overlay. We put hundreds of properties into heritage overlay last year, and we've got another huge study coming up, and it does create costs for people. But I do take on board the comments that have been made around wanting to make sure that people who really need support are those that get it. And I think that's a very valid point. So I would feel more comfortable if there is some means testing. Putting means testing into it does require some further work, which would then require it to come back to us for some further discussion, is my understanding. So it probably puts a little bit of a caveat on the decision tonight, because it makes it dependent on the implementability of an eligibility criteria. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams? No, nothing to add. Would anybody else like to speak on the amendment? No. As such, I will put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Adams, Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Nation. That amendment is carried. We're back on to the substantive now, and Councillor Isa, you were speaking.
I think I've said all I need to say. I do want to say that I do live in a heritage area, but I don't believe there's a conflict given the exemption with respect to interest in common, and where we've got such vast numbers of heritage properties in the municipality. I believe that exemption applies. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would anybody else like to speak to the substantive? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. There's no doubt that when council imposes a heritage overlay on properties, that this means potential financial implications for retaining or maintaining a heritage property. I think that there is merits in parts of this program. I particularly like the idea to incentivise landlords of commercial properties in our heritage protected shopping precincts. I don't think anybody would disagree that anything we can do to lift the facades of shops in our shopping strips to beautify those streetscapes would be welcomed by everyone in our city to make them more appealing to visit. But maybe we can increase some funding in the shopfront beautification grants program. With regards to residential, I do like that the motion includes a means testing element into the eligibility criteria, but I'm not sure I could support the whole amount potentially being taken up by residents. I'd actually rather allocate this money in the short term to municipal projects that will benefit spaces and projects that impact the greater community, given also our budget constraints. It would be good if we could explore other ways to support residents impacted by heritage overlays by reducing fees associated with additional heritage permits, or implementing ways to support those residents by making available heritage advice for free. I think I'd like to see more ideas explored in this space, and so I don't think I can support this program in its current format. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, for me, proposing a grant stream paid for by ratepayers that is going toward helping those ratepayers that may live in would most likely live in a house that is could be potentially worth a whole lot more money than certain areas of our municipality. I don't think it passes the pub test. Now, obviously, we're in Buckley Ward. We have a lot of heritage houses and commercial districts around here, and I'm on the record as supporting heritage wholeheartedly. But in saying that, the grants for residents are capped at like $3,000. I'm not in a heritage overlay, but I have restored my house that is 100 years old to heritage specifications, and anything you do costs a lot more than $3,000, and that may well help somebody, but at the end of the day, it's a fund that is being paid for by our 140 odd thousand residents, at the exclusion to a degree of everybody else. And I really don't see the benefit that is going to be achieved other than depleting an already stretched council budget. And as I said, I don't believe it passes the pub test at all, so I won't be supporting it. And also the means, anything to do with means testing, as we've been advised, will also add further potential funds, further amounts for us to consider, because that's another part of the program that hasn't been envisaged, and we've had advice on that, so further stretching the budget, so won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, everyone has spoken on the substantive. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I do appreciate that this item is coming to us in the midst of broader budget conversations, and I emphasise that the resolution as it stands has caveat on this conversation being incorporated into that broader budget conversation. No grant program will commence unless we can find the money in the budget, and I appreciate comments around that. To Councillor Sharp and other councillors have made a similar point. This money is not intended to assist property owners. Rather, it's offsetting a cost that they bear on behalf of all Moonee Valley residents who appreciate and want to protect the heritage that remains intact in Moonee Valley. I think, as Councillor Sharp's indicated, the money to restore these properties is beyond what this grant might provide people. So this isn't giving property owners money. This is rather trying to assist with a responsibility that they carry on behalf of all of us to protect the heritage that exists in Moonee Valley. That's really, the strongest argument from my perspective why a grant program like this has merit. But I appreciate that there are different views in the room.
Thank you. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Tyson. All those against? That is Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne. That motion is lost. We will invite Councillor Bedio back into the virtual chamber. Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Item 9.10 on the agenda is response to petition, replacement of trees from Filson Street, Ascot Vale. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move an alternative, Mayor, that reads that Council resolves to A, retain the 5 newly planted trees in Filson Street, Ascot Vale for the remainder of their safe, useful life expectancy. B, note that the Fosterman convertus is the nominated species as part of the infill planting program for Filson Street, Ascot Vale. C, note the concerns from petitioners requesting a change to the remaining infill tree species and future plantings for Filson Street, Ascot Vale. D, request for consultation to occur with Filson Street residents regarding a proposed change in tree species and streetscape character, ensuring the current nominated species and 2 other highly suitable and climate resilient choices are provided to residents via the process outlined within Council's tree management plan. And E, write to the lead petitioner advising of Council's decision.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. The petition was brought to us with concerns about this particular tree species, primarily the dropping of the gum nuts that cause difficulty for walking or for anyone with mobility issues. This particular species is the nominated species for Filson Street and quite a number of other streets in Ascot Vale, but it's not the only street tree that we plant, and it's not the only street tree in Filson Street. In fact, in the area around Filson Street, there are 52 different trees of about 15 or so different species. This species being the most predominant, but there are a number of other species. Street trees are obviously a frequently contentious issue, but it's obviously because people are so passionate and care a lot about the street trees, and we really need people to look after street trees in droughts. So it's good if we have street trees that residents really care about and want to take care of. So by way of compromise, and I guess recognising that there are a number of different species in Filson Street, the motion seeks to engage in some further consultation with the residents and ask residents which of 3 species, all being climate resilient species, which of the 3 the majority would prefer to have in their street. And there are a range of different species, some of which are already in the street and some of which are in surrounding streets that I imagine might be put forward to residents. So I hope that residents understand that it's difficult for council to respond to every request with trees, because we do have a policy and a management plan in place that does allocate species to different streets. But we do recognise in Filson Street that there are a number of different tree species, and so the motion seeks to take some further consultation with putting 3 different species, appropriate species, to residents to see if there can be some agreement that's reached and leading hopefully to residents taking care of street trees well into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Isa, for your work on this one. As you've already mentioned, street trees can be, people love them or people hate them, and it's not the first time that this council has had a look at some street tree issues, and I doubt it'll be the last. But it is really important, I think, through the officer's report and recommendation that, we don't want to open Pandora's box here, but there is a process and a policy for considering the best trees, and hopefully we've captured the process in this resolution to go out and just do some further consultation. It may be, the officer's report argued strongly, and there were merits to that the Queensland box is the best tree for this street. It may be that through further consultation with the residents, there can be some agreement on that, but if not, there's a process to have other species considered. And I think that that's the best approach for this situation, given the concerns that were raised through the petition to council in this instance. So, yeah, I'm supportive of this as a way forward. Noting the officer's recommendation and just hoping that a little bit more consultation and conversation with the residents can lead to a good outcome for, I think, the 5 remaining vacant street tree locations along Filson Street. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I read this report, I was very, very pleased to see that we're going to be increasing the canopy. And as you remember, my notice of motion a few months back, where I asked to increase the canopy of the city around sporting fields, was accepted. It was great to see that we're going to replace them with species that are native to Moonee Valley. As you know, I have a love-hate relationship with Melaleuca. And I was very, very pleased to see that the Melaleuca wasn't going to be the preferred species of the community there. So I just want to thank the community on my behalf personally that there'll be no more Melaleucas, and I will still maintain my campaign to eradicate the Melaleuca out of the city of Moonee Valley. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? No. Councillor Isa, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? Councillor Sharp. That motion is carried. Item 9.11 is the biannual Audit and Risk Committee report. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. And a seconder, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. The Audit and Risk Committee assists Moonee Valley City Council in fulfilling its responsibilities relating to financial and performance reporting, risk management, corporate governance and internal control systems. And the Audit and Risk Committee report is basically a high-level overview summary of the matters the committee has addressed in the reporting period in discharging its responsibilities under its charter. So the report we are receiving and noting details activities undertaken by the committee for the period 1st of July 2020 to the 31st of December 2021. Future reports will be provided biannually and will support Council's timely line of sight of its risk management, financial, internal audit and governance operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Bedio? No.
Nothing further to add, Mayor.
Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? No, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 9.12 is the councillor expenses, quarter 2, 1st of October 2021 to 31st of December 2021. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. And a seconder, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Tyson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Nothing much to add, Mayor. It's in the name. It's our expenses that are publicly declared each quarter. Happy to vote for it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bedio.
Not much more to add other than this is a requirement of the Local Government Act 2020, and it's in accordance with our expense policy that we provide a quarterly expenses report for interest of full transparency. Other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Tyson, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 9.13 is the government's report. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sypek.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. And a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a procedural matter, so just happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Bedio.
Nothing to add, Mayor.
Would any other councillor like to speak on this? No, as no one else spoke, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 10 on the agenda is notices of motion, and we have one listed on tonight's agenda. Councillor, I call on Councillor Isa to present her notice of motion number 2022-08, mayoral vehicle.
Mayor, I've been advised by the CEO that it's acceptable to move to defer this to the future meeting. So if I just might move a motion to defer this notice of motion to the meeting of Tuesday, the 26th of April, please.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. That is moved. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak on your motion?
I'm just feeling a bit exhausted tonight, and it might be better if I if I just do it another night, I think. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Councillor Tyson? Councillor Tyson? No. Would any other councillor like to speak on this? No. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Isa, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson, Councillor Byrne. All those against? That is Councillor Bedio, Councillor Sharp. That motion is carried. Now, item 11 on the agenda is urgent business. Councillors, I don't believe there's been any flagged, but are there any items of urgent business for tonight? No. Now, item 12 on the agenda is confidential reports, and there is one confidential report listed this evening. Councillors, I'm calling for a motion that Council resolves to close the meeting to the public pursuant of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to discuss the following matter. Item 12.1, Audit and Risk Committee Governance. Item 12.1 is considered confidential under the terms of section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020 as it contains information relating to (F) personal information, being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosures of information about any person or their personal affairs. The report and attachment contains a potential member's personal information. Councillors, do I have a mover and seconder? Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Sypek. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. So this is where we say goodnight to those watching the meeting via live stream. Thank you so much for your interest in tonight's meeting, and I hope everyone has a wonderful Easter. For those who are celebrating or going away, please stay safe on our roads. Enjoy the